Starstruck.
Well, welcome back to a new episode of Joyride. I am Jared Brandon Flandy, and
I am Adam Mendenhall.
today I'm glad to say we'll be doing another internationally themed episode. We actually have quite a bit of German listeners, particularly in the city of Frankfurt, so we'd like to thank you for listening and enjoying our podcast. And so that's why we decided we'd like to do a little German-themed one for you. I will put a disclaimer out there, once again though. I do not speak German, so my pronunciations may not be fantastic. So please bear with me. But before we get into the story, we do have to have some messages from our sponsors, right, Adam?
That's right.
All right, well, to start off, we have British Parts Northwest. Since 1982, British Parts Northwest has been your source for all your British car needs. They have knowledgeable staff who can help you find whatever you need to make sure your car is in the best condition possible. They carry quality parts brands such as Lucas, TRW, and Borg & Beck. British Parts Northwest is based out of the United States but ships both domestically and internationally and offers same-day shipping as well. You can place your order by calling this number, area code 503-864-2001. That number again is 503-864-2001. You can also place your order online by going to bpnorthwest.com. Remember to spell out the word Northwest. British Parts is celebrating its 40th anniversary by teaming up with the Starstruck Podcast Network to bring you hit shows like Joyride. To claim 10% off on your next online purchase at bpnorthwest.com, use discount code JOYRIDE. That's discount code JOYRIDE. And additionally, we want to give a shout out to Noah Norwood of the Hot Rod Kid podcast. He has various guests on every episode, different people from the automotive communities, the hot rod communities. He also owns a professional restoration business, and he works on anything from 1960s Mustangs to older Fords with those big V8s from back in the day. So by all means, check out that podcast. That is the Hot Rod Kid podcast that is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. So, with all that said, are you ready to begin our German-themed story, Adam?
Let's hit it.
All right. So, this one is entitled, Life in the Fast Lane, the Autobahn. There are only a few places in the world where a car enthusiast can put the pedal to the metal as much as they desire. Sometimes this is a racetrack. Other times it might be a remote road with little supervision, but there is a highway system that has entire sections where there is no posted speed limit at all. This is the German Autobahn. The Autobahn has become an icon of Germany and its people, and truly is a triumph of modern engineering. So, Adam, do you know a lot about the Autobahn other than it doesn't have posted speed limits?
I guess I'd say I know a fair amount, mainly various stories of Autobahn excursions, you might say.
Yeah. Have you had any personal friends that have had Autobahn excursions?
I wish I could say no. I just I know I know of many stories, but not directly. No.
All right. Well, you're going to hear some. Don't worry. To clarify, Autobahn is what the highway is commonly known around the world. But the federal version in Germany that features multiple lanes is officially named the Bundesautobahn. This is the preferred title within Germany. So I'm not entirely sure. Our German listeners, of course, would know, but I'm assuming that's like saying interstate highway system is just saying head out on I-5 or something like that.
I think you're right.
Yeah. Road systems are nothing new, of course. The Romans, as well as the Incas, built impressive roads thousands of years ago, many of which still exist to this day. As amazing as these roads are, the Autobahn is considered to be the first modern federal highway system in the world. The Autobahn can trace its origins as far back as the German Empire in 1913. Now, mind you, excuse me, the German Empire was something that existed after Germany unified. So if you go back like prior to the early 20th century, Germany was made up of, or wasn't even really made up, what we now call Germany was about 300 different tiny, tiny German-speaking countries. And it was during that era, it was called nationalism. Italy also unified eventually. And so eventually all these tiny little German-speaking countries came together and they formed the German Empire. So, just a moment here. So there was a small experimental portion that was built outside of Berlin where on-ramps and off-ramps were invented and used for the first time. This is back in 1913.
Gosh, that's big change back then.
Yeah, and cars are basically brand new at that point too. So this is like state-of-the-art stuff, essentially. However, the project would be shelved indefinitely when the First World War began 1 year later on July 28th, 1914. When the war ended in 1918, the German Empire would become a democratic republic. So it was essentially much like the United States. This period of the German state is referred to as the Weimar Republic. Initially, things were going well for Germany since the Weimar Republic was considered one of the most progressive democracies in the world at the time, even granting universal suffrage to all of its citizens, including women. Imagine that being a novel concept. It's not that long ago either. That's the scary.
It's really not. Yeah, when you think about it.
The positive environment would be short-lived, however. Even though Germany did not start the war, the Allied powers unfairly blamed Germany for much of the carnage that took place. And as a result, the country lost some of its territory and was forced to pay unrealistic reparation payments to the victors of the war. The victors, of course, being Britain, France, the United States, and so forth. So Germany relied heavily upon loans from the United States in order to make the payments, but this would come crashing to a halt when the American stock market crashed in 1929, beginning the Great Depression, which sucked for everyone.
Yeah,
the ironic thing about the Great Depression too is that they had what were called Hoovervilles, I think, and so like Central Park in New York was nothing but shanty towns. Which was really annoying because outside they're building the Empire State Building at the same time.
At the same time, yeah. That just yeah.
You can imagine a bunch of pissed off people who were just like assholes.
Yeah, what a contrast to have that going on at the same point in time.
Terrible. Eventually, the Depression would reach Germany, causing even more economic problems the country had already been experiencing. Inflation became so bad that it was not uncommon to see someone pushing a wheelbarrow full of German marks to pay for a single loaf of bread.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
It's sad, but it's almost cartoony, when you think, when you picture that. With the nation so down on its luck and a shell-shocked population still recovering from the horrors of war, this paved the road that eventually led to the dark destination of fascism. As a result, this created the perfect recipe for a far-right political party to gain popularity within the German parliament. Germany would be changed forever when Adolf Hitler and his gang of brown-shirt Nazis came to power in 1933. Hitler quickly dismissed all political parties within parliament and transformed the nation into an autocratic dictatorship. Well, essentially, people are thinking, well, maybe a strong man will fix all of our problems. And so not everyone thought that, but some people did. So with time, the Nazis began to implement sweeping economic plans, which did help the German economy begin to recover. Even some people who did not like the Nazis began to wonder if Hitler was actually doing good things for the country and its citizens. Mind you, this is pre-war. The war has not happened yet. There was one particular public works project that Hitler had ambivalent feelings about, though. This was the federal highway system. Hitler and his inner circle originally did not like the concept of the Autobahn because they felt it was potentially elitist, since it would only benefit wealthy Germans, who generally were the only people who could afford a car at the time. With time, though, Hitler saw the potential. He also saw the propaganda potential of such a massive project. Hitler thought the highway would bolster the Nazi agenda by providing jobs to a populace literally starving for a paycheck. Also in Hitler's mind was the prospect of military applications of such a road system in the event of a war regarding German territorial expansion. The groundbreaking of the project began on September 23rd, 1933, just south of Frankfurt. Adolf Hitler himself grabbed a shovel and began to dig alongside the other workers, with plenty of photographers documenting the moment, of course. And I'm sure once they were done photographing, he probably just tossed the shovel behind him.
Oh,
got
most
into
likely.
his big giant Führermobile and okay, so you're actually have to do the heavy working.
It's like the ribbon ceremony, but in a different function.
The project would eventually put over 130,000 people to work. Initially, the Autobahn was almost entirely constructed using manual labor. This was because Germany at the time did not have the necessary earth-clearing equipment, but it was also mostly a propaganda ploy to emphasize Aryan ideals such as strength and determination.
Wow.
And if you look back, you can see all these reels where it's all these very blonde, perfect-looking men, digging trenches shirtless, of course.
Yeah, they're making the statement.
Now, that is the idealized version that the Nazi government wanted everyone to see, of course. Despite the strong propaganda message, working conditions for the laborers was not great. Part of the problem was that a large majority of the workforce were former white-collar workers and office employees. They were not career construction workers, so they were simply not fit for the job and of no fault of their own. So it's not a lot of these big, burly Dolph Lundgrens out there. It's a lot of overweight, cubicle work guys out there.
The real side of society.
Some workers would even naively send letters to the Fuhrer himself, but this would backfire on them considerably. Hitler responded by making sure workers who complained were put under the watchful eye of the Gestapo, the brutal Nazi secret police. Even though Hitler originally did not like the project, his ego got the better of him as usual. He began to claim the project was his idea from the beginning, which a lot of people to this day think it was not. As we just mentioned, they were working on it long before him. When construction began, the highway was referred to as the Reichsautobahn, but they would eventually be called Die Straßen Adolf Hitlers, or Adolf Hitler's roads. So the pompous ass named it after himself on top of it.
A little bit of an ego.
Hitler would warm even more to the idea when he realized the Autobahn, much like the ancient Roman roads, could be the arteries for his version of the Third Reich, or Third German Empire. In other words, roads that would start in Berlin, travel throughout Germany, and reach as far as Moscow. Bridges were a major factor during the early construction period. Over 1,000 bridges were built. Many of them were great stone bridges on a scale that had not been seen in Europe since the Roman Empire. The price of building these bridges would end up costing a third of the entire budget.
Wow.
Now, you and me both have a background in, machinery and whatnot. Isn't that kind of astounding?
Oh, it is. Just to imagine the actual plethora of machinery that was required to achieve those construction goals is just daunting.
And apparently this is being done with, like I said, some machinery, but mostly hand labor on top of it. Most sections were made with concrete, But ironically, dated cobblestone methods were also used in some places. Apparently, that cost a lot, but I don't know what their reasoning was for that. Just like, let's use something really old and potentially not safe, but that's what happened. What was it? I think it wasn't in Germany, but it was Carnegie, Andrew Carnegie, when he built a steel bridge for the first time. He actually had an elephant walk across it. Because so many people were skeptical that it would work.
Wow, good little test point.
Yeah. I think more people came to see the elephant than the stupid bridge.
The
bridge. Let's see here. Eventually, the big day would come. The first completed section of the Autobahn opened on May 19th, 1935. It ran from Frankfurt to Darmstadt, which was a distance of 1,000 kilometers, or about 620 miles. There's still one little problem, though. The Autobahn was almost completely empty.
Empty? Wow.
The Nazis had been right about one thing. The only kind of car that was rarely seen on the Autobahn was usually a large Mercedes-Benz owned by an exuberantly wealthy citizen.
Who could that be?
Well, yes, it probably was the Fuhrer, but other times it was not. Look at my nice roads I built for myself.
Yeah.
The lack of traffic was so insignificant that on average there was only 1 car per minute per kilometer on the highway.
Wow.
Around this time, the early Autobahn also used to test the silver German race cars of the era, since the road was basically empty. This was done for propaganda purposes as usual, but it did help design and engineering efforts. But of course, it did not benefit the everyday German citizen. And I didn't get into that too much because that's a whole episode on itself.
No doubt.
That particular area of those German race cars. So, the only German car companies in business at the time were the likes of Mercedes-Benz and Maybach. There was not a domestic manufacturer, for the most part, that built mass-produced cars like Ford in the United States or Austin in Britain. Hitler, of course, could not stand the idea of his, quote, motorway being filled with American Fords, so he decided there should be a German equivalent. Renowned engineer Ferdinand Porsche was tasked with building the people's car, or Volkswagen. Yep. It had to be affordable, small, and simple, but still had to have the ability to transport a hard-working Aryan family. With time, a prototype of Volkswagen Type 1, otherwise known as the Beetle, was completed and plans for production were underway. An installment scheme was put in place to help German families purchase their new Volkswagen, but many would not receive a car when Germany invaded Poland on September 1st, 1931. Now, once again, Volkswagen Beetle, whole episode in itself, so it just kind of just glossed over that since this is Autobahn-centric. Most Volkswagen production was then shifted from the civilian version to the amphibious military version called the Schwimmwagen. I'm sorry to our German listeners, but that just sounds funny to us. I don't know why. It literally means swimming car. A similar version of this vehicle is better known as the Volkswagen Thing in countries such as the United States. That was a civilian repurposed one again, though. With the war becoming the main focus for Germany, light construction of the Autobahn was built with less manual labor as more machinery was brought in to speed up the process. So the whole Aryan bullshit thing, that's going out the window. So with total war well underway, the Nazis also correctly assumed the motorways would be a strong tactical advantage for military deployment and strategy. In other words, getting to Poland was much easier when your tanks could travel in a new pristine road rather than ancient cobblestone ones instead. As the years passed and the war became more and more violent, the Autobahn proved it could be used for other military purposes. One of the more noteworthy examples is the long straight parts of the road were used as runways for the Luftwaffe planes that were cleverly hidden in the forests adjacent to the Autobahn.
That's interesting.
You're driving along. Maybe I don't know. Some people may have got a Volkswagen. Maybe you're that rich guy that Mercedes-Benz. You're just driving along in this airplane.
Yeah.
It just comes out of nowhere, out of the forest, and starts running along.
Talk about terrifying.
Oh my
That'd be a
God.
sight. I'm on the wrong road. Is this a road or an airstrip?
Even though the Nazis' dream of conquest was grand as their Autobahn, they would eventually not come true. After the Allied invasion of Normandy on June 6th, 1944, the tables began to turn for Nazi Germany as they slowly began to lose the war. Ironically, as American troops began to infiltrate Germany, they began to use the Autobahn for transport, much like the enemy had done in order to invade the rest of Europe in the first place.
Well, there's some irony.
In response, the Nazis began to destroy the glorious roads they had just built only a handful of years beforehand. With time, however, the war would come to an end when Berlin fell via Soviet troops in May of 1945, and when Japan surrendered after the United States dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August of the same year. Germany itself would be divided between the occupiers with the creation of the democratic capitalist West and the communist East German states, respectively, of course. Even though the Nazi nightmare was over, fortunately, the Autobahn not only managed to survive, but also set a new standard for other highway systems around the world. One of the most prominent of these is the United States Interstate Highway System. General Dwight Eisenhower, and later President of the United States, would return to Washington inspired by the Autobahn system he had seen in Germany and thought the U.S. would prosper by constructing something similar. He managed to convince various politicians that not only would it facilitate travel between the states, but also suggested the highway system had viable military applications, much like the Nazis had said regarding their own project. Let's see here. Even though the Autobahn was the model for the interstate, there are some key differences. For one, the interstate was made much more cheaply than its German cousin. This was not done because of pettiness or to cut corners. It was done because the United States is simply a much larger country than Germany. In other words, it was not practical to build a highway system that covered an entire continent in the same way efficient German engineers would have done in their own compact country. Now, I've always been curious. I mean, we'll do an interstate episode sometime, obviously, too, but I've always been curious because the United States had to have looked a lot different before the interstate came about. Because it was mostly towns were still built the same way they had been, you know, small and compact. Probably a little bit bigger than Europe. But there wasn't these, you know, ugly, giant stretches of road where it's just nothing but Taco Bells and... and 7-Elevens, you know,
the Krispy Kremes.
Yeah, but they just look atrocious. Yeah. It's like I've seen that picture, you know, or I think it was a meme. It showed like it showed America in movies, and it shows this perfect, you know, like drone shot of New York City at night, and it looks really impressive. And it shows the United States in reality. It's just one of those big, giant, ugly roads with all the Taco Bells and Krispy Kremes and McDonald's, you know, lined up.
Everything that's been built up around the roads now. Yeah,
it does. It looks atrocious. It just
that's what I mean. You go, you know, you're on the interstate down there in California, and it's just like you don't know where one little town stops and the other begins anymore. Mm-hmm. It's just solid.
Yeah. Let's see here. One of the other main differences between the interstate and the Autobahn is the interstate has mandatory speed limits, you know, continually on all of it. This is for two reasons. One, as mentioned before, the interstate was forced to be built on a more economical budget, so driving on it at speeds more than 70 miles per hour or about 113 kilometers is not considered a safe thing to do. Another reason for this is the Autobahn is a federal system on all levels. As the name would suggest, the interstate is not. The interstate's rules and regulations vary between the semi-sovereign 50 states. Some states have higher speed limits, while others have lower ones. Another major difference between the interstate and the Autobahn is the American version was initially built with extraordinarily long stretches of roads. The problem with this was drivers would occasionally fall asleep at the wheel since the straight roads did not keep them alert.
Interesting.
Now, what they did with it says here in Germany, the sweeping bends of the Autobahn originally seemed to be a decorative feature in order to enjoy the majesty of the German countryside, but they would prove to also be a safety feature since the turns and corners kept drivers focused and alert, and consequently they did not fall asleep as easily during their journey. So, and of course, we make everything straight, like NASCAR. Someone told me this, I don't know if it's true, but apparently Formula One finally has surpassed NASCAR in popularity in the United States.
Really?
Yes.
Wow, I hadn't heard that yet.
Which is long overdue.
That is yes, long overdue.
There is some exceptions, though. Some western states, such as Montana, have higher speed limits above the national average of 65 miles per hour or 105 kilometers an hour. Now, have you ever driven through Montana in more recent years?
I have not. My sister and her husband recently did with their kids, and it's pretty wide open spaces.
What are their posted speed limits there? Do you know?
I can't remember whether it's fairly high.
For a while, it was 80. I don't know if it still is. And I think they've changed this. I know they changed it, but a long time you could drink and drive in Montana as long as you were under the limit still. However, there is kind of an ironic note to this. There have been an unfortunate amount of automotive fatalities in states such as Montana, but they've not been perpetrated by local residents, but by German tourists on holiday.
Oh my God.
So they think it's like back home. Oh, I can go really fast, but the road is absolute crap compared to what that.
Yeah, you're gonna blow out a wheel and tire on those kind of roads.
Exactly. I mean, you're out in the Wild West, literally. I mean, there's no more, guys, cowboys and horseback anymore for the most part. I mean, it depends how remote you get, but
that's true. Yeah, I mean, you'd be surprised.
Yeah, but roads not great. Let's see here. Also, I'd like to point out, Oregon is considered one of the slowest states in the nation.
That's an interesting fact as well.
I think that's where we're from, if anyone's interested. But I think what that is our weather has to do a lot with that. It rains a lot here, and then it's sunshiny, and then it's foggy and so forth. So we can only do generally 55 on a state highway miles per hour. Meanwhile, in mid-century Europe, reconstruction of the Autobahn was taking place in West Germany. This is considered to be the first modern version of the highway, and various improvements were implemented to make it even better than the pre-war version. Some of the major changes including adding more lanes and constructing a barrier between different directions of traffic. The pre-war grade of 7% was lowered in the post-war period to 4% in order to make it easier for vehicles to travel at high speeds. Speed was not only a concern, however. Economy, that being fuel economy, was also a major concern for German auto manufacturers. And this is where your kind of expertise will come in handy here, Adam. This is why at this time German vehicles were considered more advanced than their American counterparts. For example, Volkswagen engines weighed no more than 198 pounds since they were made from light aluminum alloys. So they're making things aluminum probably by the 60s. What were we making engines out of back then?
We were still cast iron for the most part. I mean,
big, giant, clunky
we had aluminum heads starting to come on scene, especially with like Buick, for example. I mean, they were renowned for introducing those, but yeah, we were still using a lot heavier materials. I don't know what the exact reasoning was behind that coming out of the war. If it was a material shortage or what, but nonetheless, they stepped up before we did.
Well, I think it went with a lot of things, especially in the 50s. Like, for example, rationing in Britain lasted well into the 50s. I don't think it ended until the mid-50s, so 10 years after the war, whereas we didn't really have that problem here. We had rationing during the war, but not during the immediate post-war period, and so we just went nuts. It was just this American idea of we won the war and everything that's bigger's always better, and so that's why you had those huge Fords and Chevrolets with those wings and those big heavy boats. I mean, it even went to clothing. They had fabric was rationed during the war, and so that's why you had those big giant baggy suits that weren't that weren't tailored. It's just like, well, we got all the fabric we want. Let's just use it. So
Just use it up.
I think that was just our attitude here at the time.
I think that's right.
So, yeah. Also, you even had sports cars like the Porsche 911 were built with 6-cylinder boxer engines that ideally provided both high performance and fuel economy at the same time. So they were even like, well, we have to have fast cars, but they still have to be economical. So we're going to try to get as much as we can out of 6 cylinders, is the idea, essentially. Things had certainly changed since the early Volkswagen days, because by 1970, there were over 14 million cars on the road in West Germany. With so many cars on the road, there was also more than 14,000 auto accidents occurring within the nation. As a result, new safety measures began to be enforced. Fines for such basic infractions rose during this period, including jail time for drunk driving. I mean, and it's not just Germany. It was the same thing over here. There was really no such thing as there's jail time for drunk driving, and just people just did it all the time.
It's astounding to think about that, but yeah, it's just crazy.
I mean, there's
how long that went on.
There was, before it really started being criminalized. There's instances where the police would pull over someone, and the guy would just stumble, out of his car, out of the car, and it's just like, don't light a match next to his breath because you'll blow everywhere.
Seriously.
But there was nothing they could charge him with. They just had to wait there until he sobered up, or just take his keys away or something, essentially. So we were talking about the drunk driving. There were other additional rules regarding seat belts, and there was even a quote suggested speed limit of 130 kilometers per hour, or about 80 miles per hour. The speed issue would reach new heights when a standardized speed limit on the Autobahn was proposed. In the early 1970s, the oil crisis was in full swing, and concern over fuel reserves was a genuine concern. As a result, the West German government imposed a federal speed limit of 100 kilometers or 60 miles per hour in November of 1973.
Wow.
It lasted less than 4 months.
Just going to say, how long did that actually stay in place?
Now, I have German friends, and I know German people are very proud of following procedure and doing the proper thing. So the fact that they complained about that says how much they hated it.
That does say something.
Safety is such a concern that German engineers were confused why Americans wanted a cup holder when they first started to import their cars to the United States. In Germany, driving is the main task at hand and something you take pride in. It is very different from here. I don't know how many times I've seen someone just pouring hot sauce in a taco as they're driving. I've seen young girls doing their makeup as they're driving. Have you ever come across that?
I have seen that firsthand on a 7-lane freeway, and as they're changing, crossing over 3 or 4 lanes, yes, doing makeup in the rearview mirror.
It's just like, I was like, I'm getting into the next lane.
I am getting as far away from this as I can.
I'm not joking. I saw some guy doing a goddamn crossword puzzle.
Oh my God. Wow. Yeah, again, this is on a different podcast, but those self-driving cars can't come soon enough for those folks. Yeah.
I'd like to point out we're not all like that.
No.
but there's still a fair amount that are. Also, getting a driver's license in Germany is also much harder than North America. In North America, what we do in the United States, anyway, I'm not sure about Canada, but when you turn 15, you get what is called a permit, and you spend 1 year, and you can only drive if you have someone over the age of 21 who has a valid driver's license, and you essentially learn doing that. And then when you turn 16, you take a written test, and then take a driver's test, which only lasts 20 minutes, a half hour.
Typically. Yep.
Yep. And then you get your driver's license. And it's terrifying to know that there's a bunch of 16-year-olds that just get in a car right after that with very minimal training.
That's true.
Let's see here. Once I find my place here. So, in Germany, this is what I found out. You have to be at least 18 years old. You have to take extensive driver's ed classes and even learn basic first aid, which I don't think is a bad idea. But, car wrecks or accidents or something like that.
Yeah, that seems like that should be more commonplace than it is.
Yeah. Getting a license is also rather expensive, with the current cost being from about 3,200 euros. So about 2,300 to 3,600 American dollars currently. It's been a while since we both got ours. I don't know what it was, but it's like hundreds. You know,
Yeah, it's in the hundreds.
Yeah.
It's a couple hundred, maybe $300 today. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
Nowhere on that scale though.
Safety and licenses were not the only thing on the mind of the planners, however. The Autobahn was expanding at a rate not seen since the 1930s, and over 3,000 kilometers or 1,800 miles were added during this period. It was also desired that an on-ramp to the highway was to be built within 10 kilometers of any point within the nation. Off the top of my head, I think it's like 6 or 7 miles. So, yeah. Well, just a moment here. Oh, here we go. On this note, if you ever find yourself on the Autobahn, you ready for this? You will probably notice a series of repeating signs. Now, to English speakers, once again, this is hilarious. They all say Ausfahrt. You want to know what it means?
What does it mean?
It means exit in German.
Well, isn't that creative?
Despite hubris sides in English, anyway, expansion would continue throughout the 1980s, and when in 1990 had been reached, over 11,000 kilometers or 6,800 miles had been added to the web. After many years were raised on New Year's Eve on the eve of 1990, 1991 would prove to be a monumentally influential year. In 1991 alone, Sir Tim Berners-Lee would introduce the World Wide Web, the Soviet Union would fall, and I, your co-host of Joyride, was born on October 4th.
Whoa!
A lot going on that year. A little earlier in recent history, the Berlin Wall had come down in 1989. Do you remember that at all?
I do remember that. When I was in school, I was that was imagery that I remember not seeing only on the TV at home, but also people viewing it at some schools when that happened. And I think, again, it was history in the making right there.
Yep. So now the two Germanys were united once again. The early 1990s would prove to be the next big phase for further construction of the Autobahn, since the Soviet-backed East did not invest heavily in infrastructure. Now, don't quote me on this necessarily, but I have heard that when Germany unified, it almost bankrupted the nation because they had to modernize the eastern side so much. Well, I don't know if that's true, but that's just something I've heard through the grapevine. But they did do it, obviously. Consequently, a large public works project began updating the former East by building new bridges, railways, and, of course, more stretches of the Autobahn. As the clock ticked, the concrete was poured, and the nations united, the great German highway was bigger than ever. Today, the Autobahn has more than 13,183 kilometers, or 8,192 miles of roadways throughout the country. In fact, it's so developed that if you were to stretch the entirety of the Autobahn into a straight road, it would cover nearly 1/4 of the Earth.
That is incredible.
And it's in not a very small country, but nonetheless a smaller country, too. That just shows you how developed it is. The modern version has come a long way since the idea was formulated in 1913. Just as one example, most stretches now have at least 3 to 4 lanes that feature freeze-resistant concrete to prevent cracking. That is at least 69 centimeters or 27 inches thick, which is twice as much as the American interstate. Traffic control is also a major priority. There are thousands of cameras that monitor the Autobahn every day to help authorities maintain functionality. Ironically, speeding is not the main concern of the German police. The most cited offense on the Autobahn is tailgating.
Interesting.
Which we have a problem with that here, too.
Well, yeah. I'll just put it out. I'll put it this way. If you're in a Dodge vehicle, perhaps a truck, typically you're getting too close.
Also, giving someone the finger is illegal. Half the American population would be in jail. That was the case here. This is often referred to as insult. That's what it's called. Running out of fuel is also prohibited.
Wow.
Something else that
You really got to be mindful.
Something else that happens here quite a bit. You see a lot of cars down next to the road going, well, they're out of gas. Other safety features include 17,000 roadside telephones for emergency uses. They would see a peak usage of 700 callers a day before the prominence of mobile phones. That number is now down to about 150 calls per day in the present period, but they're still useful in the event someone's mobile phone's not in operation. So, to my understanding, that's why they've kept them around.
Oh, that's smart. That's a great tool.
Yeah. When all these features are accounted for, Germany spends at least 825,000 euros per mile of Autobahn.
Wow.
So almost $1 million. So twice as much as the United States does on its counterpart system. Due to genuine environmental concerns of the 21st century, however, more and more restrictions have been put on the Autobahn. There are organizations that advocate for the Autobahn within Germany. Now, I just translated this to English. One of the organizations is the Autobahn Speed Lobby, and whose motto is "Free roads for free citizens." Autobahn lobby groups have even been seen as the German equivalent of gun rights groups in the United States.
Whoa. Wow. That's quite a comparison.
Despite contrary belief, only portions of the Autobahn do not have a designated speed limit. The longest stretch that has no speed limit is Route 237, which spans from Hamburg to Berlin at a distance of 150 kilometers or about 90 miles. Even though there are limits in some places, you can still drive as fast as you want in certain parts of Germany. So, it goes without saying, the world has come away since the days of Rome. With more and more highways having been built in the 20th century, truly all roads in Europe do lead to Rome. As important as these are, we would not have none of these concrete marvels if it was not for the legacy of the great German highway. The Autobahn has proved that something can be both exciting and practical at the same time. It really is one of the most German things of all time. In other words, play as much as you want, but always follow the rules. And that is the end of our story.
Well, now I just want to go fast, or even faster than I usually go. But keep in mind, make sure you're on the right road.
I did... I've been to Germany a couple times, and the first time I went, my dad was driving, and we had this Opel, they call them a people carrier, but it's essentially a small minivan, and we were traveling up and down the Autobahn. We were going from Stuttgart to Mannheim, I believe. I can't remember off the top of my head, but we finally got to that part where there's a sign that says no speed limit zone. It's a circle with these lines that run through it diagonally. And I elbow my dad to go, come on, you got to do it. You got to step on the pedal on this thing. He didn't really want to do it at first, but he goes, fine. Okay, so he gets to the fast lane, and he just puts the pedal to the metal. We got that little tiny Opel up to about probably like 110 miles per hour.
Oh, man.
And the paddles on it were rattling.
Just rattling off. Oh, my God.
And there was still people passing us.
God. That's awesome. Got to do it while you can.
I'd say generally most people probably do about 80.
It's pretty
It's
standard.
pretty the standard. I thought that's what I noticed anyway. So, but yeah, that's my Autobahn experience. I've not driven it myself, but I have ridden it with someone else's driving. So,
yeah, it's definitely something I think you have to experience. It's incredible the amount of cars and especially exotic cars that have been seen or frequent that on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to start wrapping up, and that was kind of a special episode for our German listeners here. So, any last minute thoughts here before we sign out for today?
Go fast. Don't slow down.
Ain't first, you're last.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. So I think that we're going to. That is it for this particular episode. I hope everyone enjoyed that. So of course, give us a good like, and if you can, we would prefer a nice comment on whatever podcast app you do use, and we'll catch you in the next episode of Joyride. Sound good, Adam?
That sounds good.
All right.
We'll be there.
Catch you next time. Signing out.